So you've got your number ported over, you're in the Google Voice app, and now you're thinking, okay, now what do I do? Let me walk you through all the settings and how to optimally configure your Google Voice application. So we're going to go over here, we're going to just launch Google Voice. So this is your Google Voice homepage. This is what will open right when you open the app. This is where you will now make calls on your ported Google Voice phone number. So if you would like to call your bank in the United States, this is where you will go to do that. You don't go to your phone's built-in dialer green phone button. You will open Google Voice. Your frequent or recently made calls will be right here. And if you need to dial a new number or make a new call, you can either call back right here, or you click this dial pad looking button. And this will show suggestions. I'm not sure how they come up with that, but people who Google thinks you might be calling. And you can also just start typing in a phone number like 1-800-225-6, whatever. I'm making that up, right? Hit the green button, it will call. Go back. If you hit this button down here, this will show you your contacts. These are all the people that are in your iPhone's contact book. This icon right here is for texting. You click that. Here are your text messages using your ported Google Voice line. You can choose to call this contact. You can see if this is a group text, it will have multiple numbers. And so right here, you'll click on people and it will show you all the different people in the group message. If you don't have this number in your contact book, you can add them right here. You can block these people if they're spamming you or if they're scammers. You can go ahead and block them right here. You can mark them as spam and report them directly to Google as spammers. You can archive this conversation so it's not deleted, but it will go out of your message list so that you don't have to see it. Or you can go ahead and just delete it right there. Down here at the bottom, you can type here to type a message. I could hit send if I would like to send that. This will open your phone's camera. This will open your pictures if you'd like to attach a picture to this. So we're going to go ahead and back out of this. Anybody who texts you on your number that you just ported to Google Voice will show up in here. So similar to the dialer, if you would like to text someone or receive a text from someone using the number you ported to Google Voice, this is where you do that. You don't go through the messages application on your phone. You do it inside of Google Voice. Now that you've ported your number, your calls and your messages now live inside Google Voice. The last thing, and then this is the icon to start a new message if you'd like. The last icon here is our voicemail. One of my favorite features of Google Voice is the voicemail feature, because not only does it take a voicemail for you, it will also transcribe it for you. So you can see what they said without having to call them back. And then from here, you can either forward this to somebody, you can call them back, you can text them, whatever you got to do. But it does transcribe them, which I found helpful. And you can actually have it email those to you as well, which I will show here in a second. Right here at the top right, this is the account that is signed in to Google Voice. You can go ahead and hit that. If you have multiple Google Voice accounts, they will show up right here. Of course, if you would like to add an account, you'll do that right here as well. Over here in this hamburger menu, this is where you get to all of your settings. So we're going to spend a lot of time in here going through the different setting options. Right off the bat, you have do not disturb. If you don't want to be getting calls on this device, you can just go say no and turn those off right there. You can open your archive. So this is for calls or messages that you previously marked as archived because you didn't want to see them in your feed anymore. Spam, this tells you all of your spam messages you received. You can mark everything as read if you got behind and all this stuff wasn't important, like a bunch of two-factor authentication codes. You can mark them all as red to clear off your the badge on your phone so you don't have to see all the little numbers on there. Credit, this is if you pay for Google Voice credit for international dialing. Your settings, of course, and then your help and feedback. So let's go into settings here. Right here, it shows us our Google Voice number. Now, this should be the number that you just ported over to Google Voice. If we click the little three dots up here in the top right corner, Gives you about, help and settings. Right here next to your phone number, you can copy or delete your number. The next item here is devices and numbers. So this has all of the devices that are signed in and that can receive calls on your Google Voice account. For example, we're going to talk about this in a second, but you can also receive calls and texts in your browser. So we'll click on that. Here's this device. It's called iOS device. I could rename that something if I would like. Other devices shows that I am signed in a web browser, which is true because I have that open right behind this page. So we'll take a look at that in a second. If you would like to link a number. Now, here's a setting that I don't use and that I don't recommend using this if you are using Google Voice as an expat. The point of using Google Voice as an expat is that Google Voice becomes your sort of dialer and your text repository for making your calls, the way I've explained in my other videos. If you link a number, which it might prompt you to do the first time you open Google Voice, it might say, add a new linked number. You can just say no and bypass that. What it is made to do is it is made to not only receive calls and messages, you can also set up a linked number so that Google Voice routes your calls and messages. So if you would like to, for example, you have a number here that some people have, but other people don't have, but you get a new number and you don't want to give everyone your new number, you can just set up a linked number and link your new phone number. And then when someone calls your original Google Voice number, instead of it ringing inside Google Voice, Google will just route that call and forward it to your new phone line. Now, I don't want to do that because I have Google Voice set up like an expat and I want my calls to and from my banks and stuff to live in Google Voice. Like, I don't want them to be forwarded to my random number. In fact, you can't forward to international numbers anyway, so it doesn't really make sense as an expat to have a number linked in there. Even if I were in America, I don't want to add my linked number in there because I just want to get a call using the data line on my Google Voice account. I don't want the call to be forwarded to my new random line and to ring over kind of the old school phone system. So I never use that. I don't recommend using that as an expat. But here's where you would go to add that if you would like to do that. Down here under the Messages tab, you can have all of your text messages forwarded to your email. So if you don't want to be in the Google Voice app or you don't want to get alerts because this is, people you don't care about, or you just want to use it in the browser and you live in your email more than in the Google Voice tab, you can have every single one of them forwarded to your email if you would like to do that. Down here on calls, this is another important setting that we need to take a look at. Make and receive calls. This is where you tell Google Voice what to do with the calls that it receives. Right here I have selected prefer Wi-Fi and mobile data. If you watch my Google Voice video, I tell you want the data to power Google Voice or Wi-Fi. You don't want to be using your local carrier sort of old school analog system. So I have that selected right here. I want to make and receive calls over Wi-Fi and mobile data when available. Carrier mates may apply if Wi-Fi is unavailable. So if somebody calls you and you have, carrier only, it's going to be calling through your local carrier, which will incur international dialing charges. So you want to use this top option all the time, Wi-Fi and mobile data. So let's back out of there. Incoming calls. Choose how you want to answer and forward calls. I've received a few items of feedback of people saying, oh yeah, I did what you said, but now my phone isn't ringing. I tell everyone, go open this exact setting and make sure the device you're on is enabled. Because if you have both of these off, then what's going to ring if somebody calls you? Or if you signed up on the web, then the web browser might be on, but your exact phone isn't on anymore. So if you're getting calls, and your computer's off, it's ringing to nowhere because you haven't told it to ring your phone. So always check this and make sure you're getting calls where you would like to get them. I don't get them on the web because, if I'm on my computer and I get a call, I don't need my phone and my computer to light up. And, I would rather just get them in one place, and that's my phone. So I get calls on my phone. Anonymous caller ID. If you would like to anonymize your outbound ID, you can go ahead and turn that on. And then when you call somebody, it will say number unavailable. If for whatever reason you would like to hide yourself. Call screening. This is an important one to take a look at as well. What this means is Google Voice offers to screen your calls. So if I had that on, someone would call me, and instead of it ringing my phone, Google will pick up and say, hey, Jeremy's using Google Voice. State your name and your name and phone number or something like that. And then they say, this is Wells Fargo, blah, 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 blah. And then Google says, okay, just a minute. And then Google Voice will ring and it will say, hey, this is Wells. And they play the message. This is Wells Fargo, blah, blah, blah. Push 1 to accept, 2 to decline. Oh, there's a little thumbs up for you. So the reason I leave this off is because I primarily use Google Voice to receive automated calls and texts. And if I get an automated call, a lot of times these, robot callers can't push 1 to leave a voicemail for me to be able to listen to. It just like hangs up. And so then I don't even show a missed call because the person who called me didn't make it past the screening, right? That's a great setting if you get a lot of spam calls, but for me, I don't want it to do that because if I tell my bank I want an automated two-factor authentication, I want to make sure it comes through. And the automation robot is not going to know how to like leave me a name to put through for the call screening. So I recommend having that off. The next item is get alert emails for missed calls. If you missed calls or if you're worried about that, you can turn that on. Again, I don't use that feature because I'm pretty on top of my phone, but there's that setting if you would like it. Incoming call options. In this case, if I turn that on, then it would give me the option to record calls when I get an incoming call. I don't have a use for that. I leave it off. The next item here, show my Google Voice number as caller ID when forwarding calls. So again, I don't use call forwarding. But the way you would use this is if you were using your Google Voice line for business or for work or something, and then you had your kind of real line over here. And if you have call forwarding on, people call your Google Voice number. Google just routes the number to this number. And if it routes it to there, it will show the original caller's caller ID, like, oh, this is Wells Fargo. But some cases, if I were using my Google Voice number for more kind of spammy things, like a junk mail, a junk phone number, whatever, then I might want the caller ID not to say Wells Fargo, but instead to say my Google Voice number. That way I know that this caller called my Google Voice number, not my real number. And that kind of lets me know whether or not I want to accept the call or if I want to just decline the call. Again, back to the expat world, we're not going to use that anyway, so we have that off, but that is why you might want to do that, and just explaining the setting for other use cases. The next item here, default account for Google Voice. So for example, my iPhone, if I go to call somebody, it might give me the option to call through Google Voice. And if I have multiple Google Voice lines, it needs to know which one to make the call from, right? In this case, I do actually have multiple Google Voice lines, and this particular one is not the default. So I'm not going to change that. You'll probably only ever have one, so go ahead and leave that off. Remove call history. If you would like to go ahead and hide your call history for whatever reason, you can do that right there. Down here to voicemail, this is where you can change your voicemail greeting. You can have your default greeting here, which says, this phone number uses Google Voice. Please leave a message, blah, blah, blah. You could push right here and record a new one if you'd like for how you would like your people to be greeted. And then when you're done, you save that and that'll be your new recording. Get voicemail via email. I have this enabled because if for whatever reason I do miss a call, I would like to get an email about that because I like to see my voicemails in my email. Voicemail transcripts, that's that feature I showed you earlier where Google Voice will give you like a transcript of your voicemail, which is incredibly helpful. Obviously, that will only apply to new messages because it does it when the call comes in. So it won't go back and transcribe your old voicemails. So I have that on as well. I think it's a very awesome feature. Call to listen. If for some reason you don't have access to your Google Voice app like this, you could call your Google Voice number if you know it. And then you have a PIN code you would create if I enable this. Then I would put that PIN code in, and that lets me listen to my Google Voice voicemails. I have access to the app all the time. I also have the web browser, so I don't need that feature. I don't want it enabled. Down here under payments, this is where you would add a credit to your Google Voice account if you were making lots of international calls. One question I get is, oh, well, if I'm calling from Mexico and I'm going to call back to the US, do I have to pay international fees? One thing you need to remember is international charges are based on the country you are calling, not where you physically are. So where Google Voice is free to the US, to US customers, if you are calling the US, those calls are always free. No matter where I'm at in the world, if I use my American Google Voice number to call an American phone number, there is no charge for that because I'm calling the US and the Google Voice is only allowed for the US. So it's like considered a free call. One thing to keep in mind about Google Voice is if you don't have credit here, you won't be charged. So you can't call an international number and like run up a big bill and be worried about it because they won't let you do it unless you have a credit. In fact, if you ever get that, like, oh, you need to add credit, you need to look at it and say, oh crap, I dialed wrong, something, because you shouldn't ever get that if you're just calling back to the US, which is, the way I propose to use Google Voice. But if you do want to call somewhere else in the world, you can go ahead and click look up call rates. That'll tell you how much it will cost, and then you can add credit here. But keep in mind, like I said, if you don't have any call credit, Google Voice won't complete the call. They make you prepay. So you don't have to worry about this if you've never added money to it. Google Voice will not let you make a call that costs money. Last item here, filter spam calls and texts. I always have that on because I hate getting spam calls and texts. So you can also, again, if you do get some, you can report them as spam right inside the app. So high contrast view, if you'd like to, if you're hard of seeing and you'd like to see brighter, more contrast, you can go ahead and turn that right there. I don't use that. The last item here, default apps. So if someone sends you a link, for example, inside of Google Voice, and you want to open it, right here you can pick which browser or mail or whatever you're in that you would like to open that in. So I just say, yeah, I use my defaults. I don't need it to open a special app every time. I just want the defaults. You can change that right here if you'd like. So those are all the settings in the Google Voice app and how to use them. So let me show you that you can also use Google Voice in the web. So you head over to voice.google.com. You'll have to sign into Gmail if you're not signed in already. Sign into your Google account if you are not signed in already. And this is basically the exact same application, but here in the web browser. So if you're new to signing into this and you want to receive calls in the browser, you need to head over to this little headphone jack right here and turn on your, make your selection for your microphone, ringing, and the speakers. So this will kind of test to make sure if you do get a call that it's going to come through. And then, of course, you can see my waveform right here because my microphone is working. So this site does indeed have access to all my stuff. Right here, you can see microphone and sound are all enabled in the browser. Right here, you can pick if you are receiving calls. So for example, if it's late at night and you use this for, some family or something, you don't want to get these calls, you can turn on Do Not Disturb. And then basically all of your calls are going to go to voicemail. If you just migrated to Google Voice and you're not getting calls, you might want to check this setting and make sure you don't have Do Not Disturb on. And if you recall, that's also in the iOS app. So we would like to be disturbed right now. Otherwise, this is the same interface we just saw. New message right here, and then you type it down here. Over here to the right, this is sort of your dialer pad. If you'd like to make a call, you can just type that in right here, hit the call button. I'm going to call that person. Over here on the side, we have our calls tab, we have our messages, we have our voicemails, archive, and our spam. If we go up to the settings in the top right corner here, these are basically the exact same settings we just saw in the app. So we go down, here's our Google Voice number, I can copy that. I can unlock that number if I want to port that to some other carrier. This is where I would do that. Here I have two devices. This is the same devices we saw in the iOS app. So my iOS device and then my web, I'm signed into both of those. If I wanted to remove one, I could just go in here and remove it while I'm logged in. If I wanted to link a new number, again, I don't recommend using that. That basically tells Google Voice to route your calls instead of sort of being the home for your calls. So we don't want to use that as expats. Port your number. You'll recall that button from my previous videos. If you wanted to port a new number in, that's where you would do that. Scroll down to messages here. If you would like to forward your messages to email, we already talked about that. Outgoing calls. Basically, these options are a little different because here in the browser, we don't have like a carrier, right? And the iOS app, it asks you if you want to use your Wi-Fi or data. Here, there is no option for that because you're in the browser. There's no, local carrier. You're just calling through the internet here. The rest of these are basically the same. You can set up custom call forwarding rules. So if you do use the routing, you could create a rule that says, hey, if I get an anonymous caller, they're clearly a spammer, I would like that to always go to voicemail. Don't even route that call to me, for example. You could set that up. You could have a specific person that says, yeah, hey, anytime Susie calls, forward that call to, this number or whatever. But again, I don't use that feature. This is where you would do that if you would like to do that. So the rest of these are the exact same. You can screen calls, set up your email alerts, remove your call history, set up your new voicemail if you'd like. So right here with web notifications, I have these turned on. If you'd like them turned off and you're using Google Chrome or kind of a modern browser, you go up right here. You go up to right here, and then you would just turn those off right here under notifications. That's where that setting is. Down here, you can see the credit for making international calls. You can set up an automatic recharge. If you dip below $200, it'll automatically top you off. I don't use those features. I don't recommend using them, but if you're making a lot of international calls, Google Voice is pretty cheap, and here's where you would manage that. The rest of these are all the exact same. If I wanted to make a call through my browser here, I just wanted to show you this. I'm going to go right here and copy. I just pulled up Wells Fargo. Go right here. I'm going to right click and paste. And then I can call Wells Fargo.
Welcome to Wells Fargo.
I think we got some robot feedback from my external microphone. You wouldn't be recording a video when you make a call, otherwise that would have sounded a lot better. But that's how you do that right here. You just click here. You can use your keypad to type in numbers. You can copy and paste. You can use this keypad down here. But this is where you make those calls from. If I wanted to send a message, I go right here, new message. Again, you can copy and paste or type right there, and then you can just message people right here from the browser. So I hope that was helpful for showing you what to actually do after you've ported your number over to Google Voice. The thing to remember here is Google Voice is now the app that you will use for texting and calling on that number you just ported over. So if you need to call your bank or call some institution in the United States, you open Google Voice. You don't open the little green dialer on your phone. You open Google Voice, you go to the dialer section, and you call inside Google Voice. Same thing with texting from the number you ported or receiving text messages that you had ported over. Hope this is helpful. Follow me for more, and we'll see you in the next video.